Welcome to the hidden signs of execution risk in your organization. I'm Marlene Chism, and if you tried to join me a little while ago on LinkedIn Live, I don't know what happened, but I couldn't get the sound to work. So, as a friend of mine says, one monkey doesn't stop the show. So I'm going to go ahead and record this. I'll put it out there to play live, and then that way you can watch it and you can respond to me later if you enjoy the show. So here, I'm going to start right out with the problem. Execution failures are often diagnosed as accountability problems. I'm going to say that again. Execution failures are often diagnosed as accountability problems. But most breakdowns begin earlier when expectations are unclear and the conversations that are needed tend to stall. So I want to give you some tools today to help you to fix this problem. So here's my intention for today. I'm going to introduce a new diagnostic tool that I call the alignment chain. We're going to identify the signs that indicate execution risks so that you can identify it earlier. I'm going to share some insights about how different levels in the organization think. Here's what I've learned over 25 years of speaking, consulting, researching, that many times the people at the very top don't really understand the managerial level or the director level, and the people at the front lines, they definitely don't understand the executive level or the C-suite. So I'm going to show you just a snapshot, a model of how to see how other people in your organization think. We're going to expose the organizational impact of execution risk and then discover why some common solutions fall really short. And I'm sure if you're a consultant that's watching this, this is going to resonate so big with you. So I'm going to spill the tea on this because no one wants to talk about it, but there's solutions that organizations try, and we already know if we're a consultant or a coach that it's going to fall short. You probably know me already if you signed up for this, but I'm going to do a brief introduction. My name is Marlene Chism. I'm the author of several books. These are all commercially published books. My first was Stop Workplace Drama. That was by Wiley. Then No Drama Leadership a few years later, and then 7 Ways to Stop Drama in Your Healthcare Practice, and finally From Conflict to Courage. I feel possibly another book is on the horizon, but I said I wasn't going to write anything else until I had something really profound to say. And I hope this is the beginning of that. So I'm going to introduce a diagnostic tool that I call the alignment chain. And here it is. This is how alignment happens when we talk about an end result. There's clarity, there's a conversation, there's accountability, and then there's execution. But the chain tends to break along the way. And we wonder, why aren't we getting things done? And we make this assumption that it's breaking at accountability. There's a problem hiding in plain sight. And I've been doing this kind of work for a very long time. But a lot of times, the higher the level, this is not really a problem that is seen really readily. So the problem hiding in plain sight is that leaders are expected to have conversations about performance and behavior, but leaders have not been given the capability or the capacity to do so consistently. You probably already know that many of your leaders were promoted because they were good at what they did, they had integrity, or they were always there, they were dependable. That leading is different than doing the actual work. And many times leaders find themselves surprised about the requirement of having conversations that are difficult. And they struggle to do that because of conflict, because of the lack of skills, and so on. Some of you may know that this last year I developed an online course called the Performance Coaching Model. We allowed it to be sold to individuals for a period of time, but now it's only sold at enterprise level. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely reach out to me. But it is a solution for training leaders how to have conversations, a framework, and the language. I can say this I'm going to say this with 99% certainty, and I'm always willing to be wrong to 1%, but I would love to have the conversation with anybody that says this is not true because I can find where it is. Every big problem in an organization could be traced back to a conversation that should have happened but didn't. Now, I've had some people say, but I've had the conversation, it just didn't work. I told them 1,000 times. That means you've allowed something 999 times, I jokingly say. I also say, as the saying goes, for those of you in training and development, we know the saying, um, uh, talking ain't training, telling ain't training. We can tell people a million times, but sometimes we don't have the abilities to coach or to have a real conversation or to stay in it when it's difficult. So, very often, even though you've had a conversation and there was no agreement, no alignment, no compliance, that means there's another conversation that has to happen with someone else, someone above you, someone laterally to you, or a conversation about boundaries or consequences. So, it's always breaking down at either clarity or conversation. And so here's a picture of that to make the point. Execution does not break at accountability. Accountability is just a marker that it has broken at clarity or conversation. And it's not just one conversation and it's not a one way conversation. Generally, there's going to be some conflict in there, and that's where we break down as well. So, when you look at this chain, what I can tell you is that when people at the top or anywhere in leadership lack clarity, and I can say this especially for entrepreneurs, it can feel pretty bad. And there can be some shame that is experienced when there's a lack of clarity. But I want to clear that up very easily in that clarity is different than certainty. So sometimes we're mixed up in our definitions. So if you're feeling some shame because I'm not clear, I'm not clear, I'm not clear, it may be that you're striving for certainty and you are clear. You have more clarity than you think. You know your values, you know your mission, you know your vision, you know what you desire, you know who you don't want to work with, you know what you don't want to happen. So we have to start with the clarity that we have and stop saying that we don't have clarity. But then when it comes to conversation, this is where the real inner conflict comes in. If I know that I have clarity and I need to talk with someone, I'm clear about what's happening, what's not happening, where we're getting stuck, how it's affecting the business. If I'm clear about those things and I know that I need to have a conversation, even if I don't know how to do that, if I don't have the conversation, I'm going to have what I call internal conflict. That internal conflict means I'm not aligned with who I need to be in this role. So that's where real inner conflict comes from. And then once it filters down into accountability, that's where the anger, that's where the blame, that's where you start to see external conflict. So that's how the alignment chain starts to work. So here's some ways to spot hidden execution risk. The work isn't getting completed. Pretty common for most of us, I would say, these days. Strategy is clear, but process is not. I was just having a talk with someone a few weeks ago, and she said, you know what? Generally for us, process is clear, but strategy is not. So I added that one. We know the process, we're in process, but we don't know why. So there's a lack of clarity there. The calendar's full, the dashboard's green, and we're setting it red. Decisions are made, but action seems to be optional, and everyone agrees, but nothing changes. I saw a really cool post today on LinkedIn, and it was that agreement doesn't equal alignment. And that is so true because we often agree. In my book, I call that appeasing. We appease. We want people to feel good. So we nod our heads. We say we understand. We say we agree because maybe in the structure of the organization, it doesn't feel safe, or maybe it's just a lack of courage. You have to determine what that is for yourself. And so here's some gaps very quickly that I want to show of how the gap forms. There's a lack of shared clarity on the front lines. The emotion often distorts the judgment. There's an inability to articulate the situation, or there's very often an inaccurate diagnosis of the problem. And I'm going to share an example here in a minute. There's information that is buffered upwards, and coaching capability breaks down. Now, the organizational impact is over here on the right. Executives lose real-time visibility. Decisions are being made with incomplete data. The accountability, you'll start to see it weaken and you'll think it's accountability. Then execution slows. And what you have to know is it happened at clarity or conversation. But then the risk escalates quietly and invisibly, and very often executives get a blind side and time and money are lost due to rework. Here's the truth, hiding in plain sight as well. You can't build accountability without having conversations. You cannot build accountability. Accountability, the very nature of it, requires a conversation. I'm going to be doing some research this year, so I want to pause to share this with you. I'm going to be having some executive roundtables. This will be 75 minutes, 6 to 8 executives. Maybe I'll have some different layered roundtables as well because I love to understand the different layers. So it's going to be mostly Q&A, questions, talking about execution risk, about clarity, about alignment. If you're interested in this and being invited to one of these, I'm sure that you may have to wait a bit because 6 is a small number. So if you want to do that, I'm hoping to have several this year, and depending on my capacity, I'll have as many as I can because I want the research. So focusing on accountability breakdown is ineffective for several reasons. I'm going to share a couple of reasons that I've talked about in 2 of my books. One is that we confuse the words responsibility and accountability, and that creates a lot of confusion in how we think of accountability. I'm going to share some other research here in a minute, but I like to think of it as accountability is of the heart. It's about ownership. Or responsibility is of the heart, it's about ownership, and accountability is of the head, and it's about measurement. When we confuse the two, the chain is breaking at clarity already. I'm going to show this really quickly. I've got this in my performance coaching model, a lesson on this about accountability. So if responsibility, it's of the heart, it's ownership within, it's self-directed. What I found is that responsible employees, responsible leaders, responsible executives, they want the feedback. They want the accountability and measurement because they're excited about their growth. Accountability, though, on the other hand, is of the head. It requires a witness. What this means is someone else is agreeing that you're meeting your goals. It's some sort of witness, a coach, a board of directors, another person. If you ever join anything where there's weight loss, for example, you can do it on your own, and that's called responsibility. But if you go and weigh in and there's someone helping to chart and coach you, that's your witness, that's accountability. So we often have accountability partners because we want the witness. It's someone that measures with you. So I'm going to share a few pieces of research that I thought were really interesting. This was from Culture Partners. They had 40,000 participants. I think that's a great sample. And they said accountability is incorrectly perceived as strictly consequential and almost entirely after the fact. And of those surveyed, 80% say that feedback only happens when things go wrong or not at all. What I know for sure is that we often have a viewpoint or a mindset about accountability that it's punishment. We're going to be held accountable instead of its measurement for course correction. In my mind, accountability requires a little bit of coaching ability, and I don't think most leaders have that. They tell, and they can't find that bridge of why the behavior is not shifting. They also said when it comes to holding others accountable, 82% say that they try and fail or avoid it altogether. That's because they don't understand it. And so they're telling, they're hoping, they're wishing, but there's no follow-up and there's no coaching. Then here's some research from Talent Strategy. Coaching conversations are simply not happening. Managers don't have the skills, and as a result, employees don't get coaching necessary to achieve expected results. Most managers feel uncomfortable with behavior and performance coaching. That is because so many leaders, and this was where my book, here it is, From Conflict to Courage, it was based on this. This was 2022, so it's been a while. But I tend to be 4 or 5 years ahead of the curve when I notice something, and I don't count myself as a futurist, but I saw this trend and it led to that book, that leaders think that conflict is a problem to avoid, but conflict is not the problem. Conflict itself is not the problem. It's how we think about conflict, and the real issue is mismanagement. And so when we avoid, it's mismanagement. So avoidance is mismanagement. When conflict is avoided, the chain breaks at conversation. And there's a visual that can show you what that looks like. So if you're clear and if it's avoided, it means that it's breaking at conversation. Now I'm going to share some different points of view so that you, depending on where you are, and you will be able to see how other people think. Now, with that said, this could be 8 layers further, and it could be different titles. For example, it could be provost and dean. It could, depending on your workplace and the structures and the labels that you have. We didn't put vice presidents in here, of course, so there's different layers, but I just want to share this. Obviously, the C-suite, we want profits, we want vision, we want strategy. At the director level, so there's probably a couple of layers below C-suite where we're talking strategy, profits, vision. At the director level, there's this mindset, this belief that I'm babysitting too often and I shouldn't have to babysit. Why are my managers not leading? Well, it's the problem hiding in plain sight. They haven't been given the skill sets and the coaching and mentoring to do so. And I will say that very few directors have that skill either, because if they had that skill, they would be excited to mentor the skill. So this is not just lower level frontline supervisors, mid managers. This is across the organization, is what I found. And there's a belief that conflict shouldn't really rise above director level. And if it does, if it hits the C-suite, then it's a big problem. And they don't know where it happened. They think it's accountability. The manager is thinking, I don't really want to look incompetent. And if I go ask a question, I'm going to hear, look, I'm not here to babysit. You were hired, you were promoted to do this. So figure it out and have the conversation. More telling, less, no training. The supervisor that first gets promoted is actually asking this question. They may not do it consciously, but they're saying, who am I as a leader? I don't really know. Am I like to be friendly? Am I to be hammered down? I don't know who I am as a leader, but I'm excited. I'm full of possibility. And then they get so many surprises that is so deflating. They don't know who they are as a leader. So I'm going to share the missed opportunity. Let me enlarge this. At the C-suite, it's actually modeling and supporting. I often ask in my surveys, do your top level leaders model and support everything they say they're about? Interestingly, if the people taking the survey are at the top, they say absolutely. And if the people are below director, they say not usually. That tells me there's some blind spots and misalignment. But at the director level, the opportunity is coaching, mentoring, and feedback. At the managerial level, it's actually about the sharing the problems and being vulnerable enough to be coached, whether that's a hired coach or whether that's someone above them coaching them to do the things they need to do. And at the supervisor level, it's about, who am I as a leader? I need to develop my identity. And that's something I'm really interested in. I'm very interested in identity because I think it drives so much behavior. So stay tuned for that. Who knows, I may develop something on that. Here's some common solutions I want to share. I bet every consultant that watches this would say, I agree. And I've never said it because I don't want to be politically incorrect. But here's the common solutions that generally don't work. Human resources intervention, reorganizing as a response to the problem. We're going to do a reorg. Instead of having the conversation with the person who needs it, we reorganize a department. Now, sometimes there's reasons for reorganizations. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen. But when it's happening because someone can't get along or someone can't lead someone else, the problem's still there. You've got a field of dandelions, you've clipped the bloom, and now you've got a whole field 2 years later. There's new policies to fix the problem. But here's the problem with that. If you can't have the conversation now, a new policy isn't going to help you because you'll still have to have a conversation when someone crosses over the line of the policy. There's so many requests for me for one-off workshops with an expectation that it fixes a multi-million-dollar problem, a one-day workshop because there's drama. And I used to do that because I thought the same way. There's 90-day plans, and the plan feels really good because as long as we're planning, we are checking that box and there's a dopamine hit and it feels so good. There's leadership retreats, and I do those, and I think those are effective if you can tack on some coaching or some internal help. I think they're very valuable if there's a purpose to them, but sometimes the leadership retreat alone was just more entertainment. And then there's, of course, LinkedIn Learning. And I am an instructor in LinkedIn Learning, so I believe in it. And I've had people tell me that some of my programs have been life-changing. But it's not been me that's changed their life. It's because they applied it. And they were the kind of learner that said, this isn't just about a certificate. This is about me now going through and practicing. So that's the distinction. So here's the alignment chain once again. Look at that really quickly. Clarity, conversation, accountability, and execution. And I'm going to give you some case studies of some of the things we just talked about, some of the common solutions that don't work. So this was an HR intervention, and this has 3 of the things we just talked about. The sandwich approach, and I'll say it the clean way, the sandwich approach, which is I'm going to say something nice to kind of butter you up because I'm nervous about the conversation. I don't want to be perceived as mean because I do care about you. And then I'm going to tell you what you did wrong, but then I'm going to tell you how great it is. And we're going to figure this out. But I don't really create accountability or measurement because it was just so hard to say what I needed to say. And then there's the ineffective written communications. I write a big paragraph or 5 or 6 or 3 pages, single spaced, no blocking, And I'm trying to explain myself, and the person reading it has no idea what we're talking about. It's just an ineffective communication. And I often say you should not have email as a communication whenever it's a performance issue. And then, as I've already said, there's moving the chess pieces around for the reorg. So I'm going to show you an example of all three. I'm going to put it up close so you can read it with me. Let me give you some context. This was a tech person in an organization that was not performing. They were not executing. They were not taking initiative, and they were playing video games, and they were never around when there was a problem. And if anyone said this is a problem, instead of saying, let me research that, they'd say, well, that's not really my job. That's Paul's department, or that's Susan's department. So they didn't really take ownership or responsibility of the role. Well, the problem was that the director of this person would not have a conversation with this tech individual. And so what happened was, because it was getting so bad, HR intervened with their own letter. And this is the letter, and I'm going to blow it up. It went something like this: your contributions have been instrumental. As our needs have evolved, we need to align resources to meet the broader organizational demands. Effective on, insert the date, your role will transition to the main office under the direction of new supervisor at different location. You will assume additional system administration responsibilities, and so on. Well, this person thought that they were getting a raise. They thought they really love my expertise. Now, I'm going to share something interesting here, because I've been following this case for a while. It actually worked. The reorg worked, but the root problem was not resolved. The reorg worked because there was a better leader that gave direction, that had accountability measures, that built the relationship, that saw the expertise instead of just hiding at the desk because they didn't know how to bring it up. So the director is still in place. The person got moved, problem solved, but guess what? There's other problems showing up in that organization under that director, but no one seems to see what's happening. Execution is breaking at the lack of clarity and at conversation. Here's another one that just happened not too long ago. This is the 90-day plan, but I see this all the time. I've seen it for years and years and years. And it goes something like this. This is a composite of things that I hear. We have a lot of drama, and I built a 90-day plan. Part of the plan is to bring in a speaker, and I've been tasked with finding the right price. So we've identified a problem. There's drama in the department. We need a motivational speaker, and we've got a 90-day plan, and we're doing some other things, but I'm reaching out to you for that 90-day plan to see if you would be willing to speak at our event. And I said, well, let me ask you a question first. Is this the whole team or just one or two people? And the answer was, well, it's just two people and one has already quit. And I'm like, okay, great. See, you wouldn't want to be, you right? Right. See, this was not a good fit for me because the real issue had not been accurately diagnosed. Here's the hidden factors. The problem had not been accurately diagnosed. The plan makes us feel like we're moving forward. Instead of choosing an expert based on knowledge, they are choosing a speaker based on price and probably a hidden motivation to have fun, to get people, to do some team building, to make people like each other again, to do an assessment. And those things can be helpful, but it's not attacking the root cause. So what I always say is mom and dad don't know how to handle the kids. What I often say, and this sounds really snide, but I mean it to be funny, if this is the type of thing that someone wants, I'll often say it would be better to just get a clown and have a pizza party, because sometimes people, when they just have a little bit of fun and things break, that can give you the thing you're seeking to do right now without paying the big fees of a speaker or a trainer. So the truth is what it is, but there's no reason to go in because the consultant or the speaker often gets blamed, but you have to have enough courage to say that's not the real problem. The evidence is often hiding in plain sight. Bottlenecks, noncompliance, declining accountability, tolerance of disruptive behavior, executive burnout. So it's so big. Absenteeism, customer service complaints, and HR that's doing the work of managers. And here's why execution risk persists at scale. Insight without a shared conversation framework creates inconsistency. Leaders rely on instinct when pressure is high, and then results depend upon the individual rather than the system. So, of course, I've developed things for this, and I gave you one today. It's the diagnostic tool. Often I help leaders with this tool, but you've got it, so you know what it is. There's a diagnostic tool to determine, is it clarity, conversations? We know it's not accountability, although you may see it there, and you'll also see it in execution. And then there's a shared conversation framework that drives accountability. That's a solution. And I've developed that at performancecoachingmodel.com. As I said, it's now at enterprise pricing. So if you're interested, we'll have to have a conversation to see what's right for you. It's no longer available as a one-off program. We did the trial for that for a year, and happy to say we were ready to move on. Trained skill replaces instinct under pressure. So when we get a trained skill, we know where to go in the conversation. We know the tools. We know how to have the tools. We know what to do if drama is disrupting. So we know what to do because we're trained. And execution is actually sustained by systems, not individuals. I want to share again that I'm going to be having some executive roundtables where this is more like questions, research, conversation, 6 to 8 people, 75 minutes. If you're interested, you can email me at marlenechism.com, or you can obviously reach out, direct message on LinkedIn, and I can add you to the list for future executive roundtables. That's it. If you love this and you got value, I would love if you just share this on your timeline or watch with your executives and discuss the concepts. And I'm available for exploratory calls if you're interested in working with me in the future. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.